Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. This coming February is the 30th anniversary of Gotham by Gaslight. Did you know that? That is the story that ushered in the DC Elseworlds series, and we're going to talk to a guy that was the writer of that very first Elseworlds, Gotham by Gaslight, Brian Augustyn. Really excited to talk to him about that, and also Archie 1941, his current series for Archie, which in a lot of ways I think shares some reasonable brain shelf space along with Gotham by Gaslight, because it puts the core Archie characters back in their origin period. Pep Comics first featured Archie back in December of 1941, and we got to know the Riverdale group. And this is a really interesting story because, of course, December 1941, Pearl Harbor, World War II, America's involvement in World War II begins. And how does it affect the Riverdale gang? Very interesting stuff. It's certainly not a comedy. It's a great drama and wonderful soap opera, and I think a fitting setting to put the Archie guys and women in and see them react to the real world of 1941 and the choices that World War II made a lot of civilians make. Then you'll get the lowdown on DC Elseworlds and Gotham by Gaslight, Gotham by Gaslight's sequel that featured Eduardo Barreto, of course, the original Gotham by Gaslight, drawn by Mike Mignola and written by Brian, edited by Mark Waid. We get the whole lowdown on the creation of Gotham by Gaslight, the subsequent series as well, and, the third volume that never happened. How about that? Neat stuff. The birth of Elseworlds and Archie 1941 with Brian Augustyn on today's Word Balloon. Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you very much, League, for your support. It's the beginning of the month, and I thank you for your subscriptions to Word Balloon. You are keeping the lights on, and you are keeping me mobile as well, and getting me to other cities so I can make interesting connections and line up new and future Word Balloon episodes and try to continue to innovate the Word Balloon network and bring you more than what I'm currently bringing you. I've been happy with the amount of Word Balloon podcast episodes that have been coming out lately, and also the Big Bout podcast, the new boxing podcast, part of Word Balloon Network. Oh Yeah podcast with Artie and Franco and Scoot and Mike. We bring you episodes when we can. It's tough to get 3 or 4 of us in a room, let alone 5 of us, and we do our best. So I hope you'll stick with the Oh Yeah podcast, the infrequent Oh Yeah podcast, but dedicated. So again, thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. If you'd like to subscribe to Word Balloon, if you think the entertainment I'm trying to bring you each month is worth your while, it'd be great if you subscribe via Patreon. That's patreon.com/wordballoon, or you can click on the Patreon ad on the front page of wordballoon.com. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Lightning Strikes Comics, the Irish comic book publisher behind such titles as The Life and Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, Prince Valiant's 80th Anniversary Magazine, Highlander, the commemorative movie magazine. They're pleased to announce a new series, The Phantom Strikes. It features the art of the great Alex Saviuk of Spider-Man fame and a new original story by David Williams. The Phantom Strikes also features contributions by artist Mike Collins and many more. To order copies, you can visit lightningstrikecomics.com, and retailers can make bulk orders by emailing info@lightningstrikecomics.com. Lightning Strike has also teamed up with the longest-running Phantom comic publisher, Fruit Comics, to offer you more titles featuring The Ghost Who Walks, including, for younger audiences, Kid Phantom #1, and the trade paperback of the Phantom's earliest stories for those who came in late. Other titles, such as the award-winning creator-owned anthology series, Lightning Strikes Presents, that's also available online at lightningstrikecomics.com and available on Comixology now. Check it out, go to their website, and find out more, lightningstrikecomics.com. All right, without further ado, let's get into our talk with Brian Augustyn. Man, I'll tell you, we're just weeks away from the big DC TV crossover of Elseworlds, and we're talking to the writer that wrote the very first one, the writer of Gotham by Gaslight and the current Archie 1941, Brian Augustyn, on Word Balloon. Brian Augustyn, welcome to Word Balloon. It's a pleasure to talk to you, man. A longtime reader, and thrilled with your past work and certainly what you're doing right now with Archie in 1941.
Well, thanks, John. That's a lot of nice things to say at the start. I hope it doesn't go down from here. but I'm glad to be here.
It can't.
Glad to be here.
It can't. This is really a cool project, and I know. Well, you know, it's funny. I talked to Mark Waid about it a couple months ago. Your usual collaborator on many projects over the years. But tell me, how did this happen?
Well, the project has its absolute origin, its ground zero moment in the Archie offices, without any of us present. Someone said, you know, just looking at the stats about our previous publishing history, and Archie was first debuted in comics in December of 1941. And that person said, you know what else happened in December of 1941?
Yeah.
And because, you know, they're all born in the 1970s, they said, no, what? No. But someone I think had a brilliant idea. Mike Pellerito is the co-president and the editor we've dealt with, and I'm going to give him credit, but it may not be. But somebody had a great idea that it would be interesting to take Archie from that sort of outside, that envelope outside of reality that he's existed in for 70, I can't do the math, 77, something like that years.
Sounds right.
And sort of write the stories as if they took place during the actual time frame in which Archie and his gang were introduced. And as it fleshed out, they went to Waid, who was already writing their main title. And Mark, as you may have noticed, does a couple of other things here and there. And he also knew as a historical project that it might be something he and I would have fun doing together. I'm a big history buff. So they brought us in, and we said, yeah, it sounds really cool. Did you want us to keep it comedic? And somebody else said, do you know what else happened in December? And we did, but I didn't, you know, we weren't sure that Archie as a company would want us to stray too far from what they normally do with their characters. But they said, no, it should be a drama. And so there we are. We're off and running, and, you know, research and, you know, going back and, you know, remembering things that our parents and grandparents had told us of that period, really gave us, I think, a strong through line that we could just, frankly, string along on. And the rest, as I say, is a history about history.
I'm enjoying it, man. And I think it's, I'm glad it's taking such a serious take. I also, you know, figure that with the success of Riverdale, but even before that, you know, really in the last 10 or 15 years, Archie has been a lot more ambitious, going beyond the classic Dan DeCarlo and Stan Goldberg, and nothing wrong with that. I mean, the formula's worked for 7 years.
We all grew up on that, yeah.
Yeah, but it's fun to see these kind of ambitious stories coming from Archie. And again, yeah, what a perfect thing. Also, Peter Krause, my God, he could not be more Norman Rockwellian in what he's doing. But it's fantastic, man.
I agree.
Yeah, really fits, man. It's a great. The art has a great tone, and it's this really interesting, somber setting that, much like, in a different way, what Michael Uslan did with The Life with Archie and did The Married Life. And I really thought got into some really interesting kind of soap opera moments with that series. Mm-hmm. So no, I think Archie is kind of a perfect metaphor for what was going on in the home front, because these teenagers suddenly find themselves at the start of World War II and have to make some tough life choices. Yeah, living reality and making some tough life choices. And that's the other thing, just watching the core group. And I mean, we're 2 issues in. And I mean, it's not like they all did that classic, war movie propaganda. We're all going to sign up. I mean, I think a lot of them wanted to, but I mean, God, we see of all people Moose being 4F, and he can't join. That's amazing. And Archie just kind of struggling and not being the happy-go-lucky kid during this very tough period.
Well, one of the reasons we wanted to open as we did in issue 1 with high school graduation. High school has always been the setting for Archie. I mean, yes, Riverdale, the town, but high school is in many ways, we were thinking of it as that's their safe place. That's everything that keeps them from having to deal with drama. Even to this day, I would hope that high school students are living, just shy of what's about to happen in adulthood. And we wanted to open it with the graduation. We wanted to take them out of high school, which doesn't happen very often for Archie. Obviously, if he grew up and got married and Mud Years and stuff, he got out of high school, we assume, or a GED. I don't know. But we wanted to open with that as a symbol. This is the end of innocence. That first issue is the last summer. And Archie's not just struggling with what's going to happen in Europe or with the war. He's also struggling with what he should be. He spent so much time not being an adult. What does it mean? And so that was his first struggle. He's at odds with his dad. Lots of expectations. We certainly, on some level, we have our helicopter parents to this day, tiger moms and dads, and so on. I would imagine no less from what my parents have told me was the expectation that you would do something. Now back then, I would think mostly it was get a job.
Sure.
College was, I think, it was probably less an obvious choice, although many did take it. But we wanted to graduate them and then put them on this journey to adulthood in whichever branch that was going to take them. So yes, Jughead wants to go and his father won't let him. Moose is dying to go and he can't, and so on. And Archie struggles with what he wants to do and makes his choices when he finally realizes what is and isn't expected of him. We also wanted to, start moving them into other adult, like, for instance, relationships with each other are changing and growing, evolving. We settled the question, Archie, for Archie, Betty or Veronica, the only way that it should ever be solved. And
it's like the Ginger Marianne question, but I do understand. And yeah, no, Betty is steady and absolutely. And of course, it is that classic girl next door. They fall in love. But yeah, now Betty is, unfortunately because of, Archie and Liz. And I love that moment of you'll wait for me, won't you? And yeah, so now Betty's, on the home front. And also Veronica, that's really interesting because there is that whole being a society woman, and we'll see how, the war might impact her, because I think I've been reading like a great John Wayne biography that Scott Eyman did. And, there are just these moments of like John Wayne even like dealing with society people at the start of the war. And you do get this like kind of this detachment. And Veronica's still living the society life and everything. And even though her dad is out working on missions, we don't know exactly what he's doing. I have a feeling something bad might be around the corner for Veronica, obviously.
Well, there are realizations that they will come to, all of them, and in multi-stages. We play up the traditional tension between, say, for instance, Betty and Veronica. Not only are they competitors, but, they're definitely different parts of the divide, if you will, in town. Mm-hmm. It's not just that Veronica is a young lady of the world. In the first little bits and pieces, it doesn't look like she's paying any attention to the world.
Right.
And to this day, we know people like that who don't have to.
Right.
They don't have to think. They don't have to worry too much about it. Their life is pretty much insured, insulated, and secured. And she's going to be growing up. I mean, they asked us to make them real people as much as possible, and it's still a comic book. Sure. And it's still the shorthand of storytelling like that. But we wanted to give them all, not just the teens either, but the adults, some level of growth or evolution, or in the case of the kids, maturation. So Betty and Archie come to a place where they realize it's not puppy love.
Right.
It's it's coming up to be something very real, and the war and the separation will test them. Veronica never takes Archie seriously. She just wants what anybody else wants. So, in our telling anyway, her interest in Archie is simply, I can't have him, and to trump the other girl, if they're rivals.
Sure.
But Jughead has to deal. Jughead's also the one he leaves behind. So, friendship, relationships, parent, children, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but everybody has some moments, and Mark and I agreed that we wanted to start with where you expect to find them in a way, and then give everybody a little bit of a chance to shine. So, Veronica, even Reggie, will have his moment.
Well,
so,
I like their initial conflict on the beach that happens in that first issue, and it's a kind of, it starts to be kind of a classic, argument, and then it gets ugly because Archie obviously is going through all this, questions about what he's going to do with himself, and really just, beats the hell out of Reggie. And then also they have a very adult moment of, hey man, no hard feelings, and they both kind of see that, the real world is coming, and that, these kind of trivial things don't really matter as far as the big picture goes. And that's the thing, man. It's like, okay, where there usually would be a moment of comedy or something like that, it's like, this is a different story. It's like, we got some serious stuff going on. And also, God, Fred, Archie's dad. This is great. And again, I mean, there's always been like, classic father and son kind of hijink kind of, humor. But that's the thing, man. No, you really appreciate the complexity of the situation. And, Fred wants the best for his son. He wants to protect his son. He also wants his son to grow up and be a man. And there's that great, almost like The Graduate. If that's what, 20 years later, obviously, or 25 years later. But yeah, it felt like, kind of a Benjamin Braddock kind of moment of, what are you doing with your life, kid? I mean, what are you doing when he's watering the lawn and kind of staring off into space and stuff. So, honestly,
we get those moments like the Reggie Archie conflict on the beach starts, as you say, with a typical comedy bit. Reggie smacks Archie full in the face with a giant beach ball, which causes Archie to lose what little remains of his ice cream cone. And I think for 70, however many years it's been, we've been waiting for that moment. It's catharsis in a lot of ways. It's Reggie finally gets his. The bully finally gets his.
Yeah.
And in the second issue, when they run into each other on the street, Archie is soul seeking and they're coming from the theater, Reggie and Veronica, who aren't an item, but Reggie, it seems, would like them to be, and realizes exactly what his place is. It's kind of, he's a spirit carrier for Veronica in that little bit of conversation. And you're right. We did give them a kind of, sorry about it, I kind of blew up, and Reggie's response was, I think I got it. I had it coming. Yeah.
And again, like you said, they abandoned Veronica too. They both kind of go their own ways, and she's just like, wait a minute. Somebody, isn't anyone going to escort me home? And again, that's classic kind of rich girl, Veronica kind of attitude that, like I said, it'll be very interesting to see how the story develops for all of them.
Well, you will be pleased. I will tell you, you'll be pleased.
Okay.
Her evolution, I think we gave her probably more evolution simply because she has grown up expecting to be the top of everything, realizes fairly quickly she's not even the top when it comes to the home, because dad is off making millions or more millions. And, she's been raised essentially by money and not so much connection to her father. So, she's got a lot of moments of growing up and some nice catharsis of her own and realizations. And the evolution of her relationship with Betty is very interesting as far as we can tell, but we're on the inside.
Sure, man. That's cool. 6 issues or 5 issues?
It is 5 issues.
Okay. And I don't know, do you know when issue 3 is coming out? It's obviously this month, November, coming up.
Yes, it does come up. I would say second week, I think it is, of November.
Okay.
I know it went to press today.
Oh, okay, great.
So, because we did the final proofs. So yeah, I mean we're ahead of time and on time, and they run a very efficient production machine, and it'll be out in, what is that, 3 weeks, something like that. So,
okay, yeah, that's cool.
And I will say also that, not only are we on time because Mark and I grew up knowing how to meet deadlines, but also Peter Krause saves us in time every time. And on top of it, he makes the script look about 8 times better.
It's really beautiful, man. Absolutely. And forgive me, I don't have the book in front of me. Who's your colorist? Is Pete coloring it as well?
Kelly Fitzgerald. She's been coloring for a lot of folks, but she's been the go-to, and rightfully so, for a lot of the Archie, the various and sundry Archie titles. I don't know if she colors the Archie name title or not, but I know she does a lot of that. I've seen her credits on Marvel and DC. Really talented and very definitely collaborating with Pete and with the script to find ways to set the tone. It's often bright, as you would expect an Archie comic to be, but she can do mood as good as I've ever seen. Agreed.
Absolutely, man. And have you gotten any reader feedback yet? I mean, like I said, there's been 2 issues so far, but have you seen anything? Have people, talk to you via social media or whatever and let you know what they think of it?
Absolutely. Every time there is either a promotion or a release, my Twitter feed fills up with happy people. I'm glad to say, excuse me. But I've had messages, Facebook and otherwise, and I would say 99% positive. Mark is, we'll be focusing on that 1%, but I'm happy. Reviews have been very solid. By people who have gotten that we are shooting for something that is mature, at least in, as that means more adult themes, more realistic emotions, and so on. In fact, that's one of the things people have been remarking on most positively was, we like that you trust the characters to be grown up. And, it's the benefit of working on some of these very established characters like Superman or Batman or Archie, where we know them, we know the baseline of those characters, and gives us a lot of freedom then to play there without going far from the baseline. He should always be and remind you of Archie. He's still a bit of a klutz. He's still a bit of a waffler and maybe even a little bit lazy here and there, or at least indecisive. Jughead still eats a lot, and Reggie is still a little bit of a bully. Betty is sweet, and Veronica is rich, and all the things and then we just do a sort of, that plus. But it's been great. Some of my favorite and most rewarding stuff has been working the adults and some of the side characters. So, Moose doesn't have a whole lot, but what he does have is pretty dramatic. Issue 3 has a nice scene with him and Chuck.
Yeah, I can tell from the tease. Yes, go on.
The African-American kid who is blocked from, this is not a spoiler, I'll just tell you the setup, he's blocked from going to the recruitment center.
Wow.
By bullies.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
So we get into a little of that. And very much we wanted Riverdale itself to be a character. So the people of Riverdale, we meet people. I don't think we've ever seen Moose's mom, but there's Moose's mom.
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah.
People who own businesses in the area, they may have 1 or 2 lines, but they're there. And Fred and Mary.
Absolutely. Yeah, Archie's parents, definitely.
In Archie. And in number 3, we discover a tension has occurred between Mom and Dad because Archie enlisted.
Cool.
So
Wow. Well, I'm really interested. I'm interested in your own family's experience with World War II. My father went into the Army and went into basic during 45 and was preparing for the land invasion of Japan if the bomb didn't work. And it was going to be Operation Olympia or whatever. And I always remind my sister, it's like, thank God. I mean, it's terrible because of the destruction that happened of the atomic bomb, but the land invasion of Japan could have been another D-Day in terms of mortality and everything. And I'm like, we may not have been there if things had gone the way they planned. So instead, he went to the occupation of Germany and was in Vienna. And I remember when I hit my high school years, my dad said, "Do you want to see what the war was like for me?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "We're going to watch a movie." And we watched The Third Man, the Carol Reed movie with Orson Welles and Joseph Cotton. And he said he was an MP for the American territory. And he said, "Yeah, we were dealing with the black marketers and all this devastation that you see. This was exactly what Vienna was like." And it was really war-opening. So, and again, I had uncles that did serve in World War II. And I wonder if the younger generation... World War II was 70 years ago, as we said, and also just the idea of war has gone away from being that home front concern the way that, unfortunately, and it's not just one administration you can point to. This has been going on, God, really since the 80s, where any sort of conflict that we have really becomes compartmentalized to the point where, there just isn't that same feeling of... There's a detachment unless you've got somebody that was serving, during some of, the conflicts from Grenada to the Iraq wars, to Afghanistan and beyond. I mean, where we are today. And I just, that's another interesting wrinkle about this story. As you say, that Riverdale is going to be such a big character, is how World War II affected the American home front as much, in different ways. But, there are stories to be told, both on the home front and certainly on the front lines as well.
Certainly. Well, my family missed World War II, essentially.
Okay.
I mean, they were around for its existence, but my grandfather was too young for World War I and too old for World War II.
Wow.
My dad served in the Korean War.
Sure.
But he worked out of an office building in Seoul as a clerk.
Sure.
So
behind the front lines,
there are no real war stories. Now, my grandmother and grandfather. My grandfather was, as I say, he had to register. He did register, but he was 48, and I think that's right. No, he was 45, and while he waited for a call-up, the call-up at that level never happened. And so he went to work in a war plant. He was an engineer working with the manufacture of guns. Okay. So he worked on the whatever the stamping process would have been for creating gun stocks and wooden parts and metal fabrication. So he worked on that. But my grandmother was a Rosie the Riveter.
That's great.
So now not working on planes, but working on in a plant that turned out essentially Jeeps, I guess. And so, they were participants to be sure. In fact, my grandfather has a commendation from President Roosevelt. Wow.
That's fantastic.
Because
yeah, please.
He got a medal and a letter of commendation from the president. He was not officially an engineer. He was not a trained engineer, but he was a crafts. What do they call master craftsman? A cabinet maker. He knew how to work with tools. He knew how to work with cutting tools, and he was overseeing the line as it stamped out gun parts, the stock and the grip, and watched it happen one stamp. And apparently, as it's told to me by my mom, he went home and doodled for about a week and went back. And when they were shut down overnight, he refigured the machine to cut 6 at a time.
Wow.
So
yeah,
It doesn't sound like a lot, but increasing the output by sixfold was a big deal, especially since, given the size of our forces over there, gun parts and guns
Sure.
and replacement equipment was always in demand. So,
no, that's huge, man. Well, and also, again, these are like the kind of little wrinkles about World War II that, maybe the general public isn't aware of. But really, I mean, we really built our arsenal for World War II. Prior to World War II, we weren't even, in the top 5, if not even lower than I think we were lower than the top 10 as far as Army readiness prior to the war effort. And really, Roosevelt and all the manufacturers really had to stand up and go, okay, we've never done this before, and certainly not at this level. All the automotive plants, you're now in the war business. My aunt, my dad's oldest sister, she had a great moment at the library when she was watching an actress do a demonstration in a reenactment and basically portrayed a Rosie the Riveter. And it really dawned on my aunt because she worked for Western Electric they were making telephones prior to the war, and then they switched to radar equipment. And she said, "Oh my God, I was a Rosie the Riveter. I never really thought of myself that way." And she was telling me this just a couple of years ago, and her name was Anita, and I'm like, "Well, yeah, Anita, of course you were." And she said, "Well, you always see like a woman on a scaffold, literally riveting, things onto a ship or something like that." And she said, I never really thought of myself that way, but I was. And I'm like, yeah, of course you were. And really, she knew she had worked for the war effort, just never really thought of herself that way. I look forward to, I imagine we'll see examples of this in the miniseries as well.
Had we one more issue, Mary would have been working in a war plant, but we never got to work that in. So
interesting.
How she was going to stay busy.
Sure.
But there were things that we just sadly didn't get to.
Okay. All right.
I will say, just since you mentioned it, my uncle worked until his retirement as my mom's brother-in-law for Western Electric. And he got his job because during in the late 40s, after World War II,
okay,
he worked on the DEW line. He was a radar tech. And watching for, I guess, enemy planes coming up over the North Pole. And because that was their equipment they were using, something there led to his going to work at Western Electric when he got back home to Illinois. So,
wow.
Small world.
I'm telling you. Yeah, I was surprised when we were exchanging emails. You said that you grew up in Chicago, and I was going to ask if how many generations prior to yours, if your family was here in Chicago as well, and everybody grew up around here.
My dad was first generation. His parents, my grandparents on that side, came from Poland in 1929.
Okay.
And my mom and my grandparents came to Chicago in 1950. So my mom had just graduated from high school.
Very cool. That's excellent, man. Yeah, my dad.
And they lived first on the north side and then settled on the south side.
Oh, okay. Because I'm a north sider myself. And it's funny because my parent, or I should say, my father's family, they were around where University of Chicago's Circle campus was, and grew up in a predominantly Italian neighborhood. We're Greek, and it was Taylor Street was our. Was where my
don't start me. I'll be drooling if I think about Taylor Street for too long.
I hear you, man. Absolutely.
God bless the fact that in the Phoenix area where we are, enough Chicago immigrants have come out here.
Yes, indeed.
I don't even think it should be called immigrants, but there are plenty of transplants. And I can get Italian beef. I can get Chicago pizza. I can get Chicago dogs.
Attaboy. That's good. I lived out on the East Coast
for years when I was working at DC, and almost none of that was available unless I had it sent to me or when we went home to visit. But I followed my mom out here, and now we're staying. But it might be a different issue if I didn't have the immediate access to Italian beef and so on and so forth.
No, I understand. I was looking. I think I saw something you said on I want to say Facebook about I forget what horror movie it was you saw in Creature Features, and I'm guessing that was WGN Creature Features back in the day. And certainly we're about 10 years apart, I think, in age, and I was watching that. Those same channels and stuff, so I can appreciate that.
Creature Features is around from the early 60s to the middle 70s, probably. So
yes. Yeah,
I'm assuming that I'm 10 years older, not younger, right?
Yeah, no, 10 years older. Yeah. But that's all right, close enough, man. You know, I had Sven Gulli, the son of Sven Gulli, on
Rich Kaz.
Yes, indeed, Rich Kaz. He's a great guy. But I remember Jerry G. Bishop. I remember when he was first doing Sven Gulli, and oh yeah, no, and you know, I'm in Chicago broadcasting, so
sure.
No, it's been a lot of fun getting to meet a lot of the people that were getting started when I was a little kid and everything, and I've had a chance to work with a lot of them before they retired as well. In fact, Regine Schlesinger, this wonderful news reporter at WBBM News Radio, just retired last week. And I had the pleasure of working with her last couple of years, and it was really like I'm like, I can't believe I'm working with Regine Schlesinger. This is great. Tommy Edwards from WLS Rock and Roll Days, and Larry Lujak. I got a chance to meet him, and yeah, exactly. This is Chicago broadcasting stuff here.
What was it? Was that Tommy his sidekick, or?
Yes, on Animal Stories, little snot-nosed Tommy.
Little Tommy.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember.
Bob Surratt.
Uncle
Lair, absolutely, man. And WCFL, which was the Chicago Federation of Labor, and he would say, 3 o'clock, Larry Lujak from the Voice of Labor. And I never knew what that meant until I was like a little older. And I'm like, oh, it's a union station. I had no idea. That's awesome, man. The union owned the station.
In the 1960s, that was in their jingle.
Yes, into the
Voice
70s,
of
too.
Labor, something like that.
Yeah. Oh, my God. No, absolutely, man. And you had the big top 40 wars between WCFL and WLS. So
LS was the giant. They were the big 500,000 or 50,000 or whatever.
Oh, yeah. The big ABC station in Chicago. And, and a very important station in broadcast history and stuff. No, absolutely. But, CFL was the upstart. And I think Larry started at, I want to say, LS, and then he moved to CFL. I could be wrong.
Yep.
Okay, there you go.
No, that's the direction they went.
And also, oh my God, and now I'm blanking on his name. A great old top 40 DJ from the '60s, the guy who sang on top of a pizza. You know what I'm talking about?
Dick Biondi.
Dick Biondi, of course, Dick Biondi. Had a chance to meet him a couple of times. Great guy. He just retired in the last couple of years. He kept going, man. Long time.
He was doing internet radio for a while.
Yes, he was. Absolutely. Yep. No, it's crazy.
I wanted to go into radio in the 1960s. I thought I would.
Oh, wow.
I didn't, but I wanted to, and I wanted to be a DJ. So my heroes were Lujak, and now I'm going to go blank trying to think of some of the guys I grew up with, but there was a full dial full of people like Biondi or Clark Webber or
sure.
Barney Pip was one of my favorites.
Hilarious.
Turn him into peanut butter.
Oh, Barney, what was that about peanut butter? Say it again.
Turn him into peanut butter. That was his call for some reason. followed by a live on-air, badly played couple notes on a trumpet.
Oh, so, wow. Yeah, man. I mean, again, it was that second wave of, obviously rock and roll in the 50s and everything, and the boss DJs of the 50s. But that tradition continued into the 60s and even into the early 70s. So, yeah.
Sure.
And it's, man, I'll tell you, for someone who did get into radio, it's a completely different world than the world I was hoping to join when I was in school. And,
I imagine.
Yeah, for better and for worse. But, yeah, it's very interesting times, unfortunately, in radio as it kind of readjusts just like it had to back with the advent of television and everything. I mean, it'll be very interesting to see what radio looks like about 10 years from now. And I feel very fortunate. Go ahead.
As someone who works in comic books, I know all about what it is to be in passe technology that is somehow still alive. Yeah.
Well, but, I'm go on. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I still follow Radio to the degree that I can, mostly on the internet. I stayed following Steve Dahl, for instance.
Sure. And he's stepping down at the end of the year. I don't know if you heard that, as far as his radio
I did
show.
hear it, yes. I
Isn't
go to
that
his
crazy?
website.
Yeah.
Well, he's he's a year or two older than I am, so I hope he does. But
and I get it. I understand, and also I think it was kind of uphill for Steve Dahl. Steve Dahl, for people who don't know, really funny radio host. And
he was Howard Stern before Howard Stern was Howard Stern.
I'm glad you said it, Brian. I know, and you're right. He was, and it's even Stern will begrudgingly admit that Steve Dahl was doing, and doing it in Detroit before Howard Stern had really got things going in Detroit, before he blew up in Washington and New York and the like. So yeah, it's he's a great guy. I've known Steve for about 20 some years, really since the 90s, and I'm glad he's doing well on the internet. And I do think that he'll be fine and will continue to entertain through his podcast. And it's been fun watching what he's doing with his podcast and what I try to do with Word Balloon. Yeah, I think a lot of Chicago transplants still support his podcast and love hearing him. So again, it's the change. Me. Well, there you go, man. And yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's the changing face of radio, and I think luckily podcasting is going to be a nice escape hatch for a lot of talented audio people that can still do it. It's just the business model is changing as far as radio goes. And so, right. The smart people and the talented people are able to go to podcasting. There's another great guy from the West Coast, Phil Hendry. You know that guy?
I know that name.
He is a genius. He is really an amazing guy, and he has thrived in podcasting as well after being so successful, and just a real radio comedy genius. I got to talk to Phil Proctor, one of the Firesign Theater guys. And I mean, that's the thing. That was my hope of getting into radio, was to be able to do audio sketch comedy the way so many other great people like the Credibility Gap and the Committee and Firesign Theater. And in Chicago, we had the Usual Suspects, who were old Second City guys that were doing really great comedy at WXRT. And I'm like, oh, this will be great. Dick Orkin, of course, Chicken Man. And Rich Coase used to write for Dick Orkin for one of the iterations of Chicken Man. Oh, yeah, man. So, well, anyway.
I'm blanking on Orkin's sidekick for
Bert something. It was Orkin and it was Dick Orkin, yeah. And I think Bert, I want to say, was the other guy. But
Dick and Bert sounds right.
Yeah.
They want to.
Yes. And Orkin still does a lot of advertising. I don't know if Bert is still in the game or not. I'm not sure. But
I hadn't heard anything from him in a while. I didn't know he was still active doing ads, and every now and then I'll hear it and I'll think it feels like it might be Orkinish, or frankly, he was doing the voiceover of commercials they were creating for the various local employment.com things for years.
Oh, sure.
So when I lived out in Connecticut while working in New York, I would hear his voice for FairfieldEmployment.com. Like, that's Dick Orton. See, that's how big a fan of radio. You've tapped a vein.
I like it. That's all right, man. This is what I do on the show. Is a lot of times we'll get into tangents of things that creators like beyond comics and stuff. But I'm going to steer it back to comics, and especially you, because there's a few things I wanted to ask you about beyond your current work for Archie. And one of them, of course, was, as we've said, your association with DC. And it's been interesting because you've edited Mark, and Mark has edited you over the years in various projects, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, Mark less so, because he went on to writing full time a lot quicker than I did, but yes, he edited Gotham By Gaslight, my breakthrough.
Yes, indeed, and I want to talk about that. Obviously, the first Elseworlds, and it was a groundbreaking.
Not that we
comic.
knew that.
Well, and I understand. I want to hear the origins of Gotham By Gaslight, because I bought it off the stands, and it certainly blew my mind and became this other imprint that DC went to for years beyond that. But tell me about the origins of Gotham By Gaslight.
while we were both not junior, I think we were associate editors at DC, Mark and I shared an office for a while, and we were fairly great friends almost immediately, largely because Mark was a smaller guy who needed protection because his mouth often got him into trouble. I don't think he would deny that. So, it was one of these, Androcles and the lion stories in reverse. He stuck a thorn in his own paw, and I pulled it out at our first big editorial get together. He wandered into territory where he was being accused of something he hadn't done. I mean, something petty, but the boss of the company was like, "Mark, you started that, and I want it to stop." And I just stood up and said, "Mark didn't start it, didn't have anything to do with it." And then, that backed off. And again, it was just a casual kind of, I knew perfectly well. I barely knew the guy, but I was a lot taller than almost everybody in the space. So I could demand some credibility, I guess. But having, for all of that, we realized we were of similar minds. We loved all the same comics and so on. We were definitely of the second generation of the fan turned pro. Marv Wolfman, Len Wein, guys like that. Roy Thomas were the first. But by the time we got there, almost all of the folks working at DC, the younger editors and creators, were, inculcated. That sounds nasty, maybe even dirty, but we're sort of grown by comics into comic fans and then pros. And, we were no different, and maybe a little worse, because we were sort of rabid. Mark can name, issue numbers and titles. I'm not that good. Or maybe I'm not that bad. But anyway, we bonded quite well. And he was editing a book called Secret Origins, which was an anthology title.
Yes.
And, in his end of first year, beginning of the second year, they gave him an annual. And this was right about the time that he had, in the regular monthly title, had just done, the Superman family and the Batman family. And I have an annual. Who can I go to? What's special? And he, because he'd already done all of the big names. And so he's pacing the office, and he's like, what do I do? What do I do? And he goes home. And he lived in New Jersey, and I lived in Connecticut, and I get a phone call. And like 8 o'clock at night, he goes, I don't know that I have an answer yet, but I think I'm onto something. What if we did, for my annual, I did alternate universe origins. Now, about that time, alternate universe fiction was sort of in the beginnings of things. Guys like Harry Turtledove were doing a sort of what if the South had won the war and things like that. So in science fiction, that was a cutting edge at the moment. And I said, well, that sounds like a great idea, because then you could do Superman's origin, but you can alter something or a lot and retell it. And as we talked, we realized whatever the alternate was, it shouldn't go too far. It shouldn't just be a license to make it a different character. That it needs to be that if you do Superman's origin in a different context, he should still be essentially Superman, because these are our heroes and they should rise above whatever their circumstance is to be their essential hero-ness.
Sure. And
so we talked around. What would I do with Batman? He said, and we batted it around for a while. And I said, well, wait a minute. What if, Batman is this Gothic character? What if we put him in the reality of Gothic America in the, Victorian age? And he goes, okay, what would he do? And I said, well, he'd be in the 1880s, 1890s, and he'd be, it's 100 years ago, and he'd fight Jack the Ripper, of course. Pure top of the head stuff. Pure an hour and a half of talking to Mark Waid off the top of my head stuff. So we were spinning, and my head was spinning, and it just came off peeled off, and I expected him to say, no. But he said, yeah, oh, wait, think about that. That could be something cool. Then he realized he had to have dinner and that we would talk in the morning. So as soon as I hung up the phone, I sat down at the typewriter, which is, this is a day slightly before computers, and I typed up a page of pitch for that story. And so he needed to get that approved. He needed to get the idea of alternate origins approved. And so we went to Dick Giordano, who was our mentor boss and the editor-in-chief. And he said, you can do that if you want, but this story should be a standalone. Find the right artist, and this can be whatever they were calling graphic novels.
The prestige format back then that,
right.
The precedent was already there from Dark Knight Returns and Mike Grell's Longbow Hunters with Green Arrow. But yeah, it was still special enough. So yeah, how did you guys decide upon, or how did Mike Mignola get involved?
Well, it's weird. My memory may be faulty, and I'm sure that this isn't the case exactly, but it's very close. I want to remember that we walked out of Dick's office, and in the anteroom, where his assistant sat, Mark and I were like, who would be the right artist? And, we rattled off a couple of names, and, we were like, oh yeah, that could be, okay, we can call that person. And we stepped Mignola. And Mike at that point had done a little bit here and there. And he was in the office to deliver the last of his Cosmic Odyssey to Mike Carlin.
Yes.
And we certainly knew his work. And it was literally like one of those Laverne and Shirley, in walk, Lenny and Squiggy. It was a perfect timing of, we stepped out and Mike was in the hallway and, hello, Levine.
Exactly.
And,
hello.
And Mike said, whatever you're pitching, I'm too busy. I have a commitment at Marvel. I don't have time to do anything else. And we said, just listen. We took him into our shared office. We closed the door. And Mike said, uh-oh. And we did this kind of rope-a-dope thing with, we were playing, bad cop, nuts cop. And we were just pitching it back and forth. And Mike's listening, and he every now and then would say, well, that's really interesting. I wish I had time for it. I don't have time for it. And we pitched some more, and we kept, and we, at that moment, we were improvising scenes from the story that didn't exist. We're going to have and we were trying to play to Mike's strengths. It's too early for automobiles, so I'm envisioning a chase scene with a horse. Mike likes to draw horses. And of course, it all comes down to a scene in the graveyard with these, and at some point, Mike offers an alternate take on a scene. He says something like, or you could blah, 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 and offers a better version of this visual. And then he stops and we stop and we're all looking at each other for, I don't know, somewhere between 3 seconds and 3.5 hours. And Mike looks at us sad-eyed and says, oh, bleep, I'm doing this thing, aren't I? He didn't say bleep, but I don't know what parameters of your podcast.
No, you can swear if you want to. It's up to you, buddy.
What he said was, oh, fuck, I'm doing this, aren't I? To which we could only reply, are you? And he said yes.
Well, that's the thing. And now, certainly, this is before Hellboy, but certainly what he's done with BPRD seems to be in that same wheelhouse of, and the history of BPRD and the history of Ape Sapien and the like. I mean, it kind of fits, that milieu.
He was the only artist who really would have fit. We came up with people who would have done great jobs, but there's nobody who loves, like, say, for instance, Gothic architecture or that kind of mood. I mean, and Mike has since proved this, but at the very early part of his career, this is really the first thing he got to do, and he has said this, in his style.
Yes.
I mean, he did Rocket Raccoon and Cosmic Odyssey. He did a really nice job for heroes and things like that weren't his first love. He certainly loved comics in general, loves comics in general, but his wheelhouse, if we use that term, was, light and dark and things of the shadow and creatures of the night. And he turned out to be perfect, and happenstance was on our side. All of this was, all these dominoes tipping over that were nowhere near each other. It was just a great, and again, it may not have all happened in the same morning, but doggone it, it makes a good story, and that's how I remember it. But it did come together really quickly.
Dude, it's like I said. I mean, obviously, it is a classic comic, and also a good sequel to that comic as well. Master of the World, right? Wasn't that the sequel?
Right, Master of the Future.
Master of the Future. Excuse me. I knew it was close to the Jules Verne title and everything. So,
well, I ripped off Verne extensively for that. So,
good source material to kind of start at and do your own thing and everything. So Mike didn't draw Master of the Future, correct?
He got even more famous as a result of Gotham by Gaslight. Had to go on to that Marvel project, Wolverine project, that got delayed. And I don't think he ever stopped working. So he was just way too busy. And I'm not sure that, I think we would have come up with something different as a sequel if Mike was aboard. I kind of catered the story to the artist. And Ed Barretto.
Eduardo Barretto, of course.
Beautiful, illustrative style.
Yes.
So keeping it in era, I wanted to do a lot more daytime, a lot more period detail and things that he would just love to draw and did love to draw. So we did it, we set it in I think the first one took place 100 years prior to publication. So the Gotham by Gaslight is 1889, and the second one was 1892.
Okay.
93.
Sure. Okay.
Coming up on, the Columbian Exposition made a slightly altered, made an appearance based on obviously Chicago's Columbian Exposition of 1894.
And
in fact, I sent him a lot of postcards and things with images of that fair.
That's really cool. And it seemed to me that the animated Gotham by Gaslight movie kind of combined the stories a bit and gave it that World's Fair backdrop and everything. Have you seen the animated film?
Well, of course. I was sort of part of it all along.
Yeah. I was going to ask about that. Yeah. Because they took, they changed a few things from your story. And
some choices I would not have made, and some choices that I'm actually very pleased with. The inclusion of Selena Kyle.
Yeah.
I thought that was brilliant. I loved that. I'm not sure that I don't think I could have wound up, and I'm not sure that I love the mystery villain or
Understood.
the mystery of the villain.
For people who haven't seen it, we won't reveal, but yeah.
That's right. I'm being careful not to.
Honestly, man, I didn't even, I only saw it because I bought into the streaming service and I noticed that it was on there, and I'm like, I haven't seen that DVD, and it's on the DC Universe streaming service. I'm like, what the hell? I'm going to watch it. And knowing that I was going to talk to you, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to see the differences and everything. So let me see what they did. And I liked it.
I liked it. Frankly, they had me at, we want to adapt it. So I was thrilled. If the disc had ruptured after my credit on screen, I would have been okay. But there are big letters for my name and Mike's name. They had to combine the two or invent more stuff, because the original is a 45-page graphic novel.
Yep.
And this is a 90-some minute of film. And frankly, I'm flattered fully that they went to the second one and borrowed the fair as a background, and it all fits together as a piece. And like I said, I may not have made all the same choices, but I was pleased overall. And given the uniqueness of Mike's artwork, I thought they did a decent job of animating it, given that Mike's stuff is probably not that easy to animate.
I understand.
I mean,
even
the Hellboy animations have been, the characters have been a little bulkier, and Mike's characters tend to be sort of hunched and creepy as they're supposed to be. But getting that to move, maybe not as easy as anything, but they did a decent job. They captured mood, and again, they score a lot of points. The screenwriter, whose name escapes me, scores a lot of points just for getting Selina Kyle, getting her right and right for the time. So
I thought it was a good adaptation. Again, with the changes that they made, I can appreciate that. Yeah, you might have gone a different way on a couple things. I'll tell you, it did a lot better, and also adding to the story in a way that I think, as much as they tried to do a good job with the Killing Joke, I felt like a lot of the new stuff that Azzarello brought to the script just didn't fit. It didn't fit from at least my own opinion.
Is he the one who did the adaptation?
Yeah, and that prologue that they do with Batgirl before they get down to the Alan Moore story, it was the same problem. It's a 40+ page story. You're not going to be able to fill 70 to 90 minutes, with just that. You need more. But yeah, I just they felt like two different stories, and as opposed to what I think we got with the Gotham by Gaslight adaptation, I thought it was pretty.
I agree. It was of a piece.
Yeah.
When I first heard, thanks to Killing Joke, the first thing I heard about this, it had been rumored for a while. I hadn't gotten the thumbs up yet from DC Warner. So the very first thing I heard was a friend of mine who's a Hollywood insider said, so I hear they're going forward with the Gotham by Gaslight. That's cool. Okay, that's cool. And they've cast and named the actress who was going to voice Wonder Woman, Catwoman, Selina Kyle. And I went, oh, okay. And I didn't know the name, but my friend rattled off a couple of credits, and I said, oh no, that's she's got a great voice, and she's perfect, and blah blah. And then it dawned on me, wait, Catwoman's not in my story. And so I spent a brief moment worried that she and Batman would have sex on a roof. And
exactly, yeah.
So I came off much better.
Is it Jennifer Garner? I'm looking at the.
It's Jennifer something, but it's not Garner. No, it might be Gardner.
Yeah, it is something like Gardner because, like I said, I rewatched it this morning to be kind of set with it and everything, and be able to talk to you about the differences. Yeah, because but and of course you can't trust the internet sometimes. So I'm sure they made a mistake. I thought Bruce Greenwood did a great job. As
he's
Batman.
perfect.
I'm a huge fan of his, and for a long time. I mean, even Nowhere Man back in the '90s, his kind of prisoner-esque UPN television show I thought was really good.
That's right.
So, yeah, no, and he's good Batman, decent Batman.
And I think he's done Batman maybe once before for the animation. But in general, he has a voice that goes with his square-jawed face and handsome face. And no, he was great. I couldn't have asked for better. The voice talent overall was quite good.
Had you been thinking, back to the comic, about possibly a third story?
Indeed, yes. I mean, like I say, I tailored the second one to the strengths and interests of the artist. So Eduardo, the first one was going to happen, and Mike was perfect for it. Mm-hmm. So I can't say that I planned it for Mike, but it turned out he was perfect. Barreto had a very illustrative style. He loved to do historical stuff. He had done a Shadow Strike set in the 30s for me.
Yes. Oh, wow. I didn't know you had written that. I do remember him drawing.
I know.
Wow.
I edited it. So.
Oh, okay.
So I gave him a chance to do, because again, here's a guy who did, Titans after Perez and, Batman and Superman stuff here and there. But what he really loved was, pulp style and more his heroes were more the classic illustrators. So when we came to the fact that we were going to be doing this second story, Ed said he wanted to, and so I tailored it to make sure there was plenty of, the kind of things he likes, costuming and daytime shots of architecture, and and it was very definitely influenced by Jules Verne. So my thinking was that the third one would be with yet another artist. I don't know who. But if the first one was a psychological horror story, the second one was a sort of Victorian science fiction story, the third one would have been yet again something, tonally consistent, but a different variation, slightly different change in genre. So I was thinking that the third one would have been something that tied in with Lovecraft.
Oh, cool.
So I had a 3-paragraph pitch that we were working towards, and then the Elseworlds floor broke under the weight of Batman and the Peloponnesian War, and
yeah,
and who knows what all.
Oh yeah,
That's Mark Waid's go-to joke. I got to give him that. But
there were some good ones, and there were some that were just seemed to be for the sake of slapping an Elseworlds, imprint on it and everything. But yeah, because there were some really interesting ideas over the years on the Elseworlds.
Oh, I agree. I agree. The Civil War one, the Batman Blue and Gray, was interesting. I'm not sure. I'm not always sure that the Batman aspect of the character fit, but Elliot Nagin, the writer, found a way to make the secret identity thing work in the sense of a spy operation during the war.
Yep.
And quite a number of them. I read Rain, the Vampire.
Yeah, that's
a lot of it was quite good.
Kelly Jones.
And even some of the later ones were pretty good.
I liked
Superman Red Sun.
Of course, Mark Millar's Red Sun is amazing. Absolutely. I remember a good Justice League one that kind of played with that late 1890s, early 1900s Edison Tesla kind of era of wonder. And I can't remember the writer or the artist, but it just was like seeing the Justice League at the turn of the century like that.
Right. Wonder Woman was wearing kind of a corset and a gathered hoop skirt or something. Yep. Yeah, I remember somebody interesting, somebody very capable of that kind of period art. I'm blanking on who now. Phil Winslade, somebody like that. And
I think it might have been actually Phil Winslade. Now that you say that, that's
I have a decent memory. I have a decent memory for somebody who's about to go senile, so I feel pretty good about that. But yeah, there was a lot of them, and even if they'd all been excellent, that race was kind of nearing its end, and so we got shelved. Never did find an artist that would have been worth it, and I had developed a basic structure of the story, and so it would have been 5 years after the 18, so it'd been like right at the turn of the last century, and Gotham was beginning to dig away tunnels and found something living underground.
That's cool.
So that would have been an outright horror story.
Very cool. I just read Neil Gaiman did a Sherlock Holmes meets H.P. Lovecraft kind of story. I think Dark Horse put it out, but I read that in the last couple of weeks, and it was pretty interesting. And yes,
look into it.
Was the phrase steampunk around when you guys?
No.
Okay, that's the other interesting thing is, steampunk before steampunk, really.
Well, we didn't. I mean, by literal definition, we're not steampunk.
Okay.
We are Victorian. We're historical.
True. Yes.
But in Gotham by Gaslight, there are no gadgets that were. To me, steampunk, and I'm not putting it down by any means, but it is a sort of branch of science fiction that depends not only on using the period, but to sort of do Wild Wild West style.
I'm with you. Absolutely.
Imposing technology didn't exist. The closest we come is in the second one, the guy in the Master of the Future, the guy who runs the blimp, the pilot of his blimp is an automaton. But even that, while it is clockwork punk, I suppose, that's based on available technology from the time.
Sure. No, I understand. Yeah, and you're right.
Simple task robots existed. They would deal cards, things like that. So, in fact, he is based on a French magician's robot called Antonio Diavolo. So, I know where to rip off good stuff.
I like it. That's awesome, man. Too funny. What's coming up? Is there beyond Archie 1941? What else have you got in the hopper?
I am glad to say that I have become a favorite son over there at Archie, and we are talking primarily because they love me more than they love Mark. No, primarily because Mark is so committed to 1,000 things, and also I work very closely, and they know who I am, what I can do. One of the greatest moments of working for them, aside from growing up on Archie, the comic book, and Archie, even the comic strip, which is what paper carried it? The Chicago American carried the Archie strip.
Oh, wow. Okay. Sure, the Hearst papers.
And then that became Chicago Today, and
yes,
I think
that's when I remember Chicago Today.
Continued to run the paper, reading all those comic strips, the Tribune as well. Mm-hmm. And so I was a big fan of, I'm a big fan of comic in general. Radar. In fact, one of the cooler things when I was...
Say it one more time, Mark, because you dropped out for a second. So you're a big fan of what?
I'm a big fan of comics in general, of course. I love comic books and comic strips and everything that's part of our deal. And Archie, just because, like Superman and Batman, Archie is an icon of pop culture.
Sure.
So it was a big privilege to work for this company. And so they have come to me and said, pitch other things. And I've got one or two things that they're taking seriously. So there's that. I'm finishing up a trilogy that I'm doing for Lady Mechanica, once again into steampunk and Victorian era for Joe Benitez, wherein the partially mechanical lady detective meets a Victorian era Avenger of the Night superhero. I never throw anything away.
Cool.
And and I've got feelers out, and I've had one call. So there are things that are happening.
That's awesome, man. Well, come back because
let me circle back around to the steampunk, because I want to say this. They have out here in the Phoenix area, there is an enormous steampunk appreciation society or whatever. And starting at some of the earlier local conventions I did, I became sort of an embraced, unofficial member, because they were convinced that I had been part of the invention of steampunk. And, I said, well, technically not really. Well, you're working in the same period, they said, and they were very generous to give a lot of credit that frankly wasn't due. But I was glad. I mean, I even met the first version of the Gaslight Batman costume cosplay in one of their members, who had essentially done the sum total of his contribution of outright steampunk was that he put goggles on the mask. So, like I said, I love that this stuff. I've read a bunch of short stories that do a really nice job with that, and I'm glad to be embraced. But we're at the very edge of having no legitimate claim, but I'm happy for it.
I'm with you, man. No, I get it. But that's cool, and I'm glad you're able to lean into it with Lady Mechanica. That's terrific. And I'm really glad that Archie's listening to your ideas. You got to come back, because we didn't talk about The Flash, and your long association with the Flash.
Yes.
I would love to talk about that in a future conversation. And no, congratulations, man. I really like Archie 1941. When it was announced, I immediately contacted Mark because he's been on a million times, and we're friends. And he said, "Yeah, but you got to talk to Brian." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure."
He recommended you guys to me too.
Oh, that's really nice.
I had already checked out some of your online casts and so on.
Oh, thanks.
There's plenty to talk about. I love Flash from 1963 when I discovered the comic, and then I got to grow up and be Julius Schwartz myself. But
absolutely, man. Writing and editing the character. No, I'd love to talk about that in a future conversation. So yeah, when there's something new, please let me know, and if something catches my eye, I'll contact you. But yeah, I hope this is the first of many conversations with you, Brian. I thank you for your time today.
Hey, we're landsmen. We're
local
man. Boys.
Damn straight, absolutely. So that'd be great. No, I really appreciate your time today, man. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for including me in. That's great. You do run a good show, a great show, and good luck. I podcast a little bit here and there. I love doing it.
What's your
podcast?
My
radio on.
Promote your podcast.
We're in hiatus, but I was doing something called Sort of a Big Show.
Okay.
Based around the idea that I used to humorously bill myself as sort of a big deal. So, I'm no Mark Waid, but I'm sort of a big deal.
Is your feed still on iTunes and everything?
I don't think we ever got to iTunes. It was on SoundCloud for a while.
Okay.
But our producer went out or moved away from our reach, and we're refiguring the show. But like I said, I got to get my radio on finally.
Attaboy. Absolutely, man.
If only we could get rights to songs, I'd be spinning the platter and spilling the.
Like Mike Gold. Mike Gold was DJing, doing some internet radio DJing for a while too. So
yeah, I know if he still is, but yeah, he did. That's you see. So
well, cool, man.
It's all very incestuous.
I hear, and it's funny when you were talking about when we were doing our radio memories, I wanted to bring up Mike earlier in the conversation and everything, and say, hey, we're. There's another guy in comics that has his radio background and everything. We always talk about Chicago radio,
Mike had done a lot of it. I lusted for it, but I, went off and got a different degree. So, there you go.
That's all right. And again, I told you, radio today, you're better off doing podcasting because you can do the show that you always wanted to do without having some program director have to greenlight it and everything. So.
Well, I treat it as though it were a talk show. Cool. I have my newsman sidekick and me, and we, rip on we rip on some pop culture, but politics, pop culture, and so on.
I understand, man. No, that's awesome. Well, and when you're ready to fire that up, let me know, and what we can direct Word Balloon listeners to hear your podcast as well.
Well, it's going to be a roundtable thing next, and all we have to do is figure out who's bringing the engineer. So we're very close. I'll let you know.
I understand. Yeah, please do, man. No, it was a real pleasure, dude. I thank you very much for doing this tonight.
Well, give my regards to the big city. And
oh, you dropped out. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. You said give my regards to the big city, and then I lost you. So.
Oh, I said, and go have an Italian beef for me.
There you go. There you go. Brian Augustyn, Archie 1941 is out there now. Pick up the back issues and catch up with this great series from Archie. I'm enjoying it, and I'm telling you, it's really, really entertaining. Great art from Peter Krause. A really great production, and a very interesting story and take on the Riverdale gang. I hope you enjoyed today's Word Balloon. It was brought to you again by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, for your continued support. If you'd like to subscribe to Word Balloon, you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon or click on the ad on the front page of wordballoon.com. Thank you very much, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Lightning Strike Comics, the Irish comic book publisher behind such titles as The Life and Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, Prince Valiant 80th Anniversary Magazine, Highlander the Commemorative Movie Magazine, and many more titles. And, of course, their new series, The Phantom Strikes, featuring Alex Saviuk and David Williams doing the writing. Really interesting stuff. To order the copies for this new series, you can visit lightningstrikecomics.com. Retailers can make bulk orders by emailing them at info@lightningstrikecomics.com. Check it out. The new book, The Phantom Strikes, featuring Alex Saviuk and David Williams from Lightning Strike Comics. Thanks again for listening. We have another episode out there today. I hope you listen to it. It's Bob Greenberger, a great comics historian who has 2 incredible coffee table books just in time for holiday season, and you should really consider them. DC Superheroines, 100 Greatest Moments, and the Justice League's 100 Greatest Moments. Really great. A great concentration of comic book history in 2 amazing books. We talk about those and a lot more. Bob Greenberger on the other episode that is released today on Word Balloon. I hope you listen. Thanks a lot for listening always. Thank you very much, League of Word Balloon listeners, for your support. Fly high, Junior Birdmen. We're in the holiday season. We're getting there. I know, man. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to rush the holidays. I consider Thanksgiving one as well. So we're on the march to Thanksgiving, and that's good. And that means that there's some great episodes coming up for November. Already very interesting people lined up. A few other episodes already in the can. Can't wait to share them with you on Word Balloon. So thanks for listening. Check back with me at the end of the week. Until then, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions. Copyright 2018.